You know what happens when you feel yourself to be the center of the universe? You know when people complain, you know what they're saying? When you complain about your job, when you complain about this class, when you complain about your companion, what are you saying? I am the center of the universe. Listen to my complaints. They are important. I am important. Galileo comes forth and says, no, we are not at the center of the universe. In fact, we are a speck of dust in the middle of nowhere. It is us, the earth, that revolves around the sun. You know, religion stands no chance under an avalanche of scientific facts. It doesn't work. The church, of course, crucifies Galileo, who is under house arrest for the rest of his life. But the damage had already been done. First, you have the bubonic plague that forces people to ask questions. Then you have Galileo telling all of us in this class that if you imagine God making the earth and the human beings to be the very center of everything that's created out there, you're wrong. Maybe your life means nothing. Maybe the earth means nothing. Next time you want to raise your hand and ask a question, just imagine for a moment your question means nothing. Next time you want to make a complaint about this or any other class or any other person, say to yourself, your position means nothing. But in a culture such as this, where everybody feels as if they are profoundly relevant, then everything means something. And then you're going to spend your entire life wrestling with a footnote that is really quite childish and infantile. So not only do people have to wrestle with the fact that death is the ultimate meaning of democracy, rich or poor, king or slave, black or white or blue or yellow, it makes no difference. When death comes, it just gets you. And the possibility that the entire life could amount to absolutely nothing, a speck of dust. It doesn't end there though, because around the 15th century you have a figure called Martin Luther. The word Catholic means universal. And it is out of this philosophy, universal philosophy of Christianity, that Christians for centuries have gone to different lands to convert people from their cultural philosophy of life, religious philosophy of life, to make them feel bad about who and what they are, so they could impose Christianity on them. There are some parts in Africa that every Christmas what they do is they make these tiny little statues of Jesus Christ and they hang them on tree branches. And then at a certain time, they take these baseball bats to these tiny little statues, saying that the missionaries came to these parts of Africa to contaminate us with Christianity. We are reclaiming our cultural heritage. We are not going to allow Christians and Christian philosophy to dominate our land, dominate our psyches, create false emotions about us. Martin Luther comes around the 15th century and does something amazing. And during this time, the church is in trouble. They need money. And they say to people, kind of like the way I do it, any instructor does it. We call it the selling of indulgences. You give me some money and I will protect your soul. Instead of you spending 10 years in hell, I'll have a chat, private conversation with God. You'll spend 2 years, not in hell, but in purgatory. And after 2 years, you'll go directly to God. And Martin Luther comes about and says, can church really do that? Can someone's soul be saved by you giving money to the church? Can you really get an A in a philosophy class by writing an essay? Because it's virtually the same thing. Can you get a 4.0 by simply plagiarizing, parroting, mimicking, without really understanding? The answer, of course, is yes. But does that make you a philosopher? The answer is no. You just have a 4.0. So he rose up and he fought an entire industry, the Catholic Church. You know, the Roman Catholic Church, its power had never been questioned. It had never been challenged until the 15th century. And every time the Catholic Church asked Martin Luther a question, he said, if it's not in the Bible, I'm not going to eat it. If indulgences is not in the Bible, New Testament, I'm not going to eat it. And so powerful was his ideas and presence that the Catholic Church decided to kill him. They were not successful. But you know what he did? He locked himself in a barn somewhere and he translated the entire Bible into German. The Bible is in the New Testament, Aramaic, then Greek, then Latin, then German, then English. So what you have is a translation of a translation of a translation of a translation of a translation. It's like James Baldwin, and then 21st century, someone who read his ideas from a distance and then claims to understand. Or Socrates. Now you have this division in Christianity, Protestants and Catholics. The first time in Christian history. Then after this period, it was very, very difficult to go back having a religious mind about anything. Half of you is religious, the other half is scientific. And just to make things a little bit more complicated, many thinkers who came after Martin Luther began to challenge religion. And then something really amazing happened around the 18th century. You know, I can go into the backyard and work like a mule for about 10 hours. My wife, maybe an hour and a half. Physically, I'm just able to work like a dog. My wife's physical stamina doesn't allow for that. So there was always a division. This is what men occupy, and this is what women occupy. With the invention of technology, something interesting happened. You don't need muscles. You just need how to drive a bulldozer. A man can do that, a woman can do that. Now women walk into society, and now men have to deal with women walking into society. But something even more amazing happens. You know, my niece and nephew, really, really good kids. They lived in Roseville for about 18 years of their life. Roseville has Sierra College, American River, Sac City, Consumnes River College, Sac State, UC Davis. But no, Armand had to go to NYU. And Denise had to go to Brown. 5-hour flight to New York. 8-hour flight and train to Brown. Do you know what happens when you live in a village and all of a sudden someone tells you there is a city out there? If in the village you make $2 an hour, in the city you can make 20. You know what you're going to do? You're going to leave your parents. You're going to leave your friends. You're going to leave your culture and environment, a place you have known for all these years. And what are you going to do? You're going to go to San Francisco. Who the hell do you know in San Francisco? Nobody. For what? $20 an hour, $30 an hour. And what's the consequence? You're realizing you've been abandoned by a universe that's indifferent to your cares. You feel lonely, depressed. Now you have to make friendship. Not because you know anything about friendship, but because you're lonely. Something you never experienced in your village. As cultures became more and more and more secular, and secular I mean the following. If I want to be happy, Ivy, I have to wait till I'm dead, till I am standing before God, and He will sentence me to hell for a few years, purgatory for a few more years, and then He'll say, the gates of paradise have now been opened unto you. Go and have a good time. That's where happiness exists for me. When cultures become secular, you don't need to wait till you're dead. You want to be happy? Go to San Francisco. Go to New York. The town never sleeps. You can have pleasure every single moment. With every pleasure comes joy and happiness. You don't have to wait till you're dead. The only difference now is this. Secular cultures create happiness for your flesh. Religious cultures make happiness for your soul. You have lots of sex in a secular culture, and then one day you walk into a classroom, you raise your hand and you say, I want meaning in my relationships. How do I create meaning? I don't know. Go to a village. And now you realize that people now live in conflict. There's a battlefield. Desires of the flesh, desires of the soul. Now the problem with your soul, Ivy, is that this is not a religious culture. So you don't read the Bible. You don't even believe in God. And even if you do, you're like a journalist. You don't understand much of it. It's very, very abstract, way in the distance. So just in case your life becomes problematic, you don't pray. What you do is you seek out a therapist. And you're looking for a quick fix to a problem called meaning that has plagued humanity for thousands of years. Out of this trashy environment that's been created, all in the name of science and truth, comes forth a man named Frederick Nietzsche. What the hell does Nietzsche want, Ivy? Can I come to class and talk about something that is relevant to me, meaningful to me? Can you inspire me? Can you make me feel as if I'm a human being and not a robot? That's Russell's question. My kid is passionate. I don't want schools to kill that passion. I don't want him, in essence, to become like me. A man who's drowning but keeps himself afloat. Now, he cloaked his question very, very nicely and deceptively. He said, I don't want my kid to be devastated by education. But what he's saying is, I just don't want him to turn out like me. My life isn't bad. It just lacks depth and meaning, and I don't have the energy to look for depth and meaning. Nietzsche, like the rest of us in this class, gets up and says, I want my life to mean something, man. Just don't want to go to work just because to make money. I don't want to take notes because I have to do a quiz. I don't want to be forced to go to a class. I don't want to be forced to be in a relationship. I want passion. He loves Christ. He hates Christians. Christ lived passionately. Christians live by mimicking Christ. Once you guys go online and Google or YouTube some lectures on philosophy, they'll give you lots of information. Immanuel Kant, David Hume. Or if you're interested in the history of Christianity, go on YouTube, some of that. But then if you happen to have the spirit or the soul of Frederick Nietzsche, you say, I don't care about the history, man. I want to feel alive. How do I do that? In a very crude way, that really is the foundation of existentialism. How do I come to life? How do I make sure I'm not fake? How do I make sure that I have the soul of a human being and they just don't look like one? There is, in fact, a really nice story in the Gospel of Barnabas. You're not going to read this, I'm just going to tell it to you, where, by the way, if you want to know just a couple of things about Barnabas, read the Gospel of Luke, and you will find a few things about him. In the Gospel of Barnabas, we are told that Jesus is running so fast that his jacket or cloak falls to the ground. When he gets to his disciples, they are shocked and they don't really know what the hell is his problem. So they ask Jesus, why the hell are you running so fast? And Jesus doesn't say anything. He just points to a direction. And the disciples look and they say, well, they're just people following you. He says, no. They look like people, but within they're serpents. Run away from people as if you have seen lions. They will devour you. They will waste your time. They are ridiculous, infantile. The reason why I'm going at this length telling you about existentialism, Ivy, is because in my infantile thinking, I'm taking your question to be very serious. And I take your question to be serious because wrongly I take you to be serious. And I wrongly take you serious because in my false assumption, I believe that you're mature enough to understand what it is that you're asking. And then you know what you're going to do before we leave today. You're going to raise your hand and you say, I'm sorry, Professor. Say, yes, Ivy. Any of this going to be on the quiz? Say, really? I spent an hour and a half talking about meaning, purpose, feeling alive. And now you ask about some ridiculous quiz that we may or may not have? What the hell is wrong with you? Nietzsche looks at our culture and asks, can anything good be given to us, human beings, in this culture? Are the music we create in the 21st century any good? Do we have any good artists? Who is the embodiment, the icon of beauty nowadays? Kim Kardashian. Do we ever question whether or not she has the mind of a bimbo or not? Whether she has a soul that's mature? We don't care about those things. I have a friend, she came here some years ago, and initially she didn't like me. And I don't really blame her. I don't even like myself. After spending 2, 3, 4, 5 years, with me, my wife, and our friends, eventually she realized she needs to go back home, a different country. She writes me and calls me once in a while saying, I am looking for a man who is worthy of my emotions, who is worthy of my ability to reflect, think deep about things, feel deeply about things. I can't find a single man. What am I to do? That's Frederick Nietzsche for you. When he talks, there is this Persian poet by the name of Rumi. Some of you in this class may have heard of him. آتش است این بانگ نای و نیست باد هر که این آتش ندارد نیست باد. He says that when I speak, there is this fire. Speech is nothing but air. And then you create some waves. And then it makes alphabets and then words. And then you impose meanings and definitions on these words. And he says, don't pay attention to the words. Pay attention to what lives inside this air. And if you pay close attention, it's fire. And do you know what fire does, Ivy? It burns everything. So when you read the New Testament, you'll come upon passages where Jesus says, if you sit next to me, you sit next to fire. He doesn't care about your ideas, man. He doesn't care about who you are, what you believe in. He's there to burn everything away. That's the only way you can be baptized. So Nietzsche is desperate in having someone in his life who can truly understand what he's going through. He finds no one. A few weeks ago, I asked you why you haven't come to this class, and you said, I've been in my room. 8 billion people on the face of this planet, a classroom of 20, 30, 40 people, and yet you have zero desire to see anyone, to talk to anyone. That's Frederick Nietzsche for you. Now, you may not understand the feelings that may live inside you, and I doubt very much many of us do understand the feelings that live inside us. But the more consumed you are with those emotions, the more isolated you make yourself. That is Nietzsche. That is existentialism. And then once in a while you cry out, can someone see me? Can someone hear me? Can someone feel me? Can someone understand me? And eventually Nietzsche comes to realize there is no one. So he creates this story. Do we have time for the story? No, not really. But let me tell it to you in a very crude way, nevertheless. Do you have any questions or comments before I tell you the story, Abigail? Can I be honest? I don't like drugs. I don't like people who do drugs. I don't like people who cheat their way through life. I can't. Let me tell you a story. There was a man some years ago, his name was Aldous Huxley. Have you heard of him? Well, you should. Go read his books. Huxley was like Frederick Nietzsche. He read, he felt, but like Moses, he said, if there is a God, I want to see it. I want to be touched by it. I want to feel it. After reading, after writing, Nothing. It's like someone tells you, sit, close your eyes and breathe. And eventually the Buddha will come to you. You've done that for 20 years, not an experience. And you say, really? I bought into your goddamn philosophy. I've wasted my time for 20 years. Is there a God out there? Is there nirvana? That's Huxley. So someone told them, why don't you do LSD? Really? Yeah, he did. And he had experiences. And so he went around the country saying that there is no reason for people to sit and meditate, to read books, to go to workshops. Just do drugs. Once you do drugs, you close your eyes and Jesus will come your way. That's all you need. Smoke, maybe drink. Then he came to realize something really interesting, that life is complicated. And though you may have had a vision of Jesus Christ, it doesn't mean that you know how to live well. In fact, there's a good chance that you may be chasing the ghost. That you may want to smoke for the second time to see Jesus, but Jesus doesn't come. So you think, well, it must be the weed. So before you know it, you're smoking a gallon a day. He said that if you really want to understand anything worth understanding in life, you need an educated mind and you need emotions that know how to be patient. There's a guy who teaches in Berkeley. I think his name is Michael Pollini. He's written books on coffee. He's written books on drugs, psychedelics, beautiful books. And he's very, very popular now. He's on Jimmy Kimmel once in a while. He goes on the Colbert Show. He knows really the anatomy of drugs and how drugs impact the human being. And he says something that sages and philosophers have said for many, many thousands of years. Drugs could be a good way to enlightenment, but make sure you have a guide. Make sure that you're working with someone who knows, first, your psychology. Because your problem may not be drugs. It's something that they did in monasteries for the longest time. That, people, not people like you and I join monasteries, people who are sincere enough and honest enough to say, I want to go to the monastery because I want to see God. And they fast, they pray, they do the Jesus pray like 10,000 times a day. Jesus Christ, Son of God, have mercy on my soul, a sinner. They would chant, and then they would go to the abbot and say, I do all these things to see Yahweh, to see Christ, but nothing. And the abbot would say, what you need is some alcohol, drink it. Or what you need is some drugs. Here is this drug. I will guide you through it. And then they would have a vision. But they would never become addicted to drugs. And they would never go around promoting the usage of drugs. One of the best set of books you could ever read, and I think most of you should, since this is Oakland and people enjoy doing drugs. One of the best set of books that you could ever encounter, read the works of Carlos Castaneda and his work with Don Juan. Here you have this man, this old man, who knows anything, everything you need to know about drugs. And Carlos Castaneda works with him for about 10 years. But he only allows Carlos to do drugs maybe 5 or 6 times. Because you do drugs not because they are fun. You do drugs because you desire to understand the complexity of what it means to be a human being, living in a world that's immensely complicated. What exactly is it that a drug does? Inspires, opens certain doors in your psyche. First of all, you need to know your body has those components. Put your physical body in the right places, around the right people. Those people will inspire those components to come to life. Don't cheat. You'll get caught. When I was very, very young, I was going to get married to this young woman. She would have fantastic dreams. but she was angry all the time. And I remember going to my teacher and saying, I love her. He says, Amir, I don't care what kind of dreams she has. She could be sitting next to Jesus Christ every single day. But life, married life, is complicated. These dreams are not going to save your life. Walk away from her. The next day I called her and said, this is done. Walking away. You can have profound experiences with drugs. You'll just not know how to live life. And don't give yourself to 5 minutes of experience and 5 weeks of misery. It's not worth it. Any other questions? Joaquin? Just give me one thing. Anyone else before we go home? Alex? Sure. Ivy, I haven't forgotten about your turtleneck. Vera, Alex.
Like, sort of forgive, but like they haven't like actually like changed. Haven't yet.
Your question is very complicated. First, and we won't tackle it today, maybe on Thursday when we come back. The first thing you need to know about forgiveness is that you have put yourself in a position of becoming a judge where you see a certain behavior and then you categorize it as negative, as wrong. Take care. Thank you. So that's the first thing you need to understand. That someone has done something to you and you have deemed it negative. Second, when someone does something wrong to you, it could impact you on a physical level, it can impact you on an emotional level, it can impact you on an intellectual level. And these all create different intensities, and they all have different value systems, you know. And forgiveness has nothing to do with demanding someone to change. If someone has repeatedly wronged you, you're dealing with an addiction, a habit. And any habit has a history. History creates identity. It's usually very, very difficult to overcome. Now, the other thing you need to kind of ask, there are two approaches to forgiveness. First, it's very easy to forgive another. It's very difficult to forgive oneself when you have forgiven and then you feel betrayed. Because then you say, why do I need to forgive this person all the time? And then resentment comes about. Anger comes about. The point I'm trying to make is, it's a very complicated question. We can tackle it if you remember on Thursday. Also know that emotions have history. And for the most part, they're very subtle. You know, they're like sand. They kind of seep through your fingers. You have to catch them, okay? And then you have to break them open. You have to look inside them. The other thing you need to know before we go is this. If you really want to understand anything, you're going to find yourself in a very painful environment because you won't like what you see. Imagine I'm racist and I don't like white people. Just imagine that for a moment. It's not very difficult for you to blame me, to say all these nasty things about me, and then eventually to forgive me. The more mature, evolved response on your part would be the following. Look at my culture. Look at the environment in which I was born. Look at my parents, and then ask yourself, did I really have a chance of becoming anything but a racist? And then you realize I am the product of my environment. I was conditioned this way. Your task is to educate me. For you to do that, you have to create an environment for me. Allow me to hang out with people who are like you, think like you. Allow me to create an environment psychologically so I can trust you, have faith in you, eventually like you and love you. Then I will change. But that's too much work. It's much easier for you to simply categorize me as a racist. Have a nice day. It's good to see all of you. Joseph, it's good to see you.